Hi there, my name is Laurence Mitchell, and you just heard what I do, what I am. 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, ADHD, and other motor issues. And now I'd like to actually talk to you about a little joke of mine. I was actually born 6 weeks premature. So one wonders, if I was born when I should have, would I be 7 foot tall? Or would I be normal, whatever normal is? There again, if I was born when I should, would I lose some exceptional traits like I have this unbelievable memory? I memorise everywhere I've gone. I've been travelling around the world, and often I'd be in a place like in New Zealand and someone would ask me directions and I would tell them where to go, although I'd never been there before. So it's very, very hard to say. Anyway, let's just talk about nursery school. Nursery school was when my parents first learnt there was something wrong with me or something different about me. Now, when I refer to my parents, I'm actually going to refer to my mother, because my father, from his point of view, he was a businessman. He wasn't really interested in me. He couldn't really take to some of my behaviour. So throughout my life, he was very much a burden as a father. Although he wanted the very best for me, he often couldn't offer it. So in some respects, as you're later to find out, he also bullied me as well. Anyway, so at nursery school, my mother gets a phone call one day. We think that there's something wrong with Laurence. We don't know what's wrong with him, but whenever he sits with the children in the class, he seems to get himself up, walks over, finds himself a corner, and just faces the wall. For some reason, I had fascination in this wall. So what happened next? I was then advised to go. My mother actually took me to the University College Hospital where I was born at. And between the age of 3 and 8, I went to see a child psychiatrist. First weekly, then monthly, or was it bi-monthly, and then monthly. And when I got to about 8 years old, the psychiatrist said to my mother, well, whatever Laurence has got, we don't know, but we imagine that he will lose whatever he's got during his teenage years, except, of course, it didn't, it manifested. Anyway, in junior school, when I was about 8 years old, there was a particular occasion that I really remember where I felt I was humiliated, put down by the headmaster of the school. Of course, my mother tells a slightly different story in that he helped her and me get the best possible support from the social services. But of course, that's that side. But how it all started off was that I was amongst all the children in the class, I fidgeted the most. I couldn't sit still, I couldn't focus on the teacher. I was more interested in outside sounds. Just outside the school playground was a busy North Circular Road. Just outside another window was a fire station. So I was very, very intrigued by what was going on outside of the classroom. Now, so the teacher decided to make an example of me. Laurence, you're going to be punished, right? What did detention mean? I had to go sent into a corner of the classroom and face the wall. Wonderful. Laurence has just been given the prize of his life. Why? Because Laurence could go into his own little world where he felt safe. When the teacher realised that this wasn't working, I was sent to the headmaster's study. Now, of course, here I'm quite tall, but back then I was like a pint-sized little midget of a boy. And so I'm entering the headmaster's study. I'm not too sure whether I should knock on the door. I just didn't know anything like that. I felt very, very intimidated. So And this is an enormous bulk of a man who was about 6'9", tall, 300 pounds as far as I was concerned. And he suddenly gets up and he said, well, Laurence, what are we going to do with you? We're going to have to punish you. So my immediate thoughts were, and I said, sir, you're not going to cane me. And he said, cane you? We don't do things like that here. Anyway, the following day in assembly, with all the whole school there, and he's with a few of the teachers on the stage, decided he would tell the story of the little boy who came to his study because he was sent there for a punishment. So suddenly I felt the entire all the pairs of eyes of the teachers in the school zooming in on me. I didn't know where to put myself. And that to me was the biggest punishment of them all. Because suddenly, all of a sudden, I suddenly became the attention of the bullies. One of my problems was I liked to be on my own. I didn't like to play with the other children. So it's because I was different, I was set upon. I don't really remember much of the therapy other than going to see this psychiatrist whenever I did. Very interestingly, one of the subjects I excelled at was music. From 4 years old is when I first started playing the piano. Although I advanced to grade 8 by the time I was 14, I got very, very frustrated because I took on pieces of piano playing, like I liked Liszt and Beethoven, but I chose the most difficult pieces and I couldn't play them, and it really frustrated me. I think it was because I enjoyed playing certain tones. Certain tones made me feel very, very good, and other tones didn't, and it caused me to have a mini tantrum with myself, and I would sort of slam down the top of the piano and jump around, but really angry with the piano because it wasn't giving me what I wanted. Yet, ironically, where my parents lived was just next door to a man called William Pleath. So every time I used to go to school, I used to watch Jacqueline Dupre practice, and also 2 doors down from us we had a Maltese composer called Charles Camilleri. So I had a lot of people around me who could help me learn music, but it was the autism that prevented me from learning. At school, my parents had problems getting me into the school that they wanted to because of allocation. So I lived in Finchley, and the school I went to was in West Hampstead, a comprehensive school called Hampstead School in Westbury Road. And it had the highest number of nationalities of any school in the country. There were about 53 nationalities there. Now, one of the problems, the school was very, very close to Kilburn, which was very, very similar to Brixton, and there were a lot of bullies there. Now, I'm Jewish, and perhaps it was because somehow these bullies thought that anyone who was Jewish had to have a lot of money. But I remember repeatedly how by 1 or 2 bullies, one who was psychologically bullying me, another one who was intimidating me with possible physical harm. But this psychological boy, he used to empty out my pockets virtually every day, saying to me, Laurence, I'm just going to borrow this from you and you'll get paid back the following week. Of course, that never happened, and eventually got to a point where my mother decided it's better to send me to school without any money in my pockets. Another time when the bullying got so bad that my mother actually came to the school one day and said, what are we going to do about the bullying, that the I think the teacher actually spoke to the boys who were bullying me, but it just got even worse. It was worse for me. It was a great mistake. Now, another thing that occurred when I was 11 years old was I've got congenital malformation of the bones in my arms. And there was, as I was growing through my adolescent years, something was happening in my arms. And for 18 months, it was a very, very painful condition which mimicked paralysis. I couldn't move my arms, I couldn't move my hands, and it was only through going to see a homeopath and giving me treatment, osteopathy, acupuncture, that this person was able to alleviate all the symptoms. But I missed out on vital classes at school. One particular subject was sex education, and I perhaps like to think that this missing out on sex education was one of the precursors of me not being able to talk to girls. I remember being very attracted to one particular girl in the science class about 3 years later, and even though she was a few feet away from me, I didn't know how to approach her. I didn't know what to say to her. Very, very interesting. In one particular date, or rather the very, very first date I went on, I actually said to my mother, well, what do I do? Do I ask the girl for a kiss? Because I just didn't really understand what I should be doing or not should. I got embarrassed very, very easily. Another thing that was going on at home was whilst watching television, I would get very, very embarrassed by a scene that I didn't understand. I would have to cover my eyes, or I would have to dash out the room. For some reason, I imagined that I was part of the scene. And this caused a lot of complications later on in life. One of the things that actually happened to me more recently, which I think related to what happened to me in junior school when I was confronted by this enormous headmaster, was some of the things that I suffered from throughout my life were agoraphobia, social phobia, where I would suddenly I would be frozen and I didn't know where I should run to next. I had no problems in getting on a tube train, but I could be in an open field, plenty of people around me, and suddenly I would think that I was about to do something very, very embarrassing, or something very, very embarrassing would occur. But this used to go on often, daily. I never knew when I was going to get one of these attacks. And it was mentally very, very painful. Now, anyway, going back to what happened was, I was cycling along the Grand Union Canal a few years ago. I think I was about 55 at the time, and I became very aware that there was a Tyrannosaurus on one of the bridges. Amazing, ridiculous. How could that be? A dinosaur around? And perhaps what I was doing was taking all my childhood sort of memories, the time I was a little boy, 2 or 3 years old, and I'd seen books about tyrannosauruses and dinosaurs. And of course, when my mother put me to bed, what would I do? I would get up, put the light on, I'd start checking through the drawers, under the bed, in the cupboard, just to make sure there wasn't a Tyrannosaurus Rex there. And of course, these sort of memories stayed with me throughout of my life, but they built up into difficult memories, very, very invasive memories. So this particular one, the T-Rex caused me one of the most difficult problems throughout my entire life. And imagine, on this particular instance, when I was cycling along the canal, I actually had to get off my bike. I had to find a corner underneath one of the bridges where I was crouching. I was that much afraid until the sensation passed. So, one of the things that was also going on, when I was 12 years old, my father decided he was going to put an end to my being bullied. So what does he do? He gets me put into a boxing ring with a boy who was 2 years older than me. I got pummeled. That was the first and last time I stepped into a boxing ring or wanted to have anything to do with what my father advised me. The following year he sent me, both my mother and my father decided that maybe I should go away to a summer camp on my own. I remember being driven there and actually getting in, when my father wasn't looking, sort of getting into the boot, hoping that I wouldn't be found. I didn't fit in with the other boys. I wasn't interested in learning about first aid. I wasn't interested in learning about survival skills. I wasn't interested in erecting my own tent. The scoutmaster couldn't understand, wasn't really supportive towards me. All he was interested in doing was making me do what I didn't want to do. What did I do? I ran away into the forest where I felt safe, where I could sort of hide behind a tree and just go back into my own little world, because that's where I like to be. Now, leaving school was a very difficult and traumatic time of my life. I have only had one CSE to my name. I failed at school exams miserably. The only subject I actually excelled at was music. Unfortunately, my teacher smoked in class, and I didn't know how to speak to her in a way that she would understand. Look, miss, I don't like you smoking. It's making me feel very uncomfortable. And maybe I did try, but I wasn't getting anywhere. So I reported her to the headmaster. She got into trouble, and she decided to punish me by putting me onto the wrong A-level curriculum. Now, A-level curriculum, considering I hadn't even done O-level music. But I do remember that I was quite gifted into being able to learn until I got bored, virtually every single instrument in a symphony orchestra. So that was something I was very good at. But when it came to leaving school, big problem. What do I do? I thought I was going to be a dustman or a street cleaner. Anyway, went to the job to get a job, and my first job was at Whiteley's store in the menswear department. That job lasted 3 days. I was then sent to a smaller menswear shop. One of the things that I didn't understand was this idea of selling my stock to the customer. As far as I was concerned, it's not my stock, it's the shop stock, it's his stock or my boss's stock. So I always used to say to the customer, how can we help you? What of our stock are you interested in? And of course, the manager or the boss of the shop, when he saw, well, this is not a sort of young man I want in my shop as a salesman, because he doesn't know how to sell it. Rather than actually try and say, hey, Laurence, hang on, the way you're trying to sell is wrong. Not that that might have helped or to, I don't know. Anyway, I didn't really have to worry about a job because I had a wonderful vocation ahead of me. I collected stamps, and that's how I started off in business. I walked into, then it was the St Martin's Lane Stamping Coin Centre, and there was a young man there, not much older than myself, and he saw me fiddling around, and he said, Laurence, would you like to learn to deal in stamps? And that's how I started. So from a very young age, I was actually dealing in stamps, and I began to make a lot of money. I mean a lot of money. At 18, I was earning more than any of you lot. And that's another story. But eventually, when I was about 22 years old, I even got bored of the stamps because I remember I had this enormous box, and one of the I was looking up a stamp with a cattle for £300. It dropped into the box, and I spent 72 hours and I couldn't find it. My mother was an antique dealer, so I eventually, I'd been sort of dabbling a bit in antiques, and I eventually moved on to antiques where I've been all my life. I wrote a book about porcelain called Meissen. I'm involved in writing the second edition at the moment. Anyway, business-wise, I enjoyed travelling. I enjoyed travelling when I was in my 20s and 30s, and it was a problem my wife had with me, is I travelled almost incestuously. I travelled to New York or Los Angeles. I was doing this once a week. Can you imagine? I'm married and I'm travelling abroad at this rate once a week, or to Tokyo, to Australia. One of the problems I had was with one of my competitors, whilst I was doing all this travelling, even if I would often go away because I overheard something that they were going to do and I thought I'd be missing out. So I always thought that someone else had an ulterior motive. I better just go along just to keep a check on them, and that's what I used to do. Very interesting, not knowing about my ADHD, how many planes I got on which were going in the opposite direction to where I wanted to go. That did happen a few times. Thank God it's not too many. Anyway, one of the very interesting things happened when I was meeting my wife. I remember when I first met her, she was actually telling this story to one of her clients. She was a beautician. She said, it's very, very strange. Laurence comes up to me and says, I like you. I'd like to go out to you. So she says to me, can I, what's your name? She actually said to me, what's your name? So I said to her, well, why do you want to know that? And even after she said that, it probably wasn't that. And then I got up the huff and I actually walked out. It took about 3 or 4 times of me actually seeing her before I actually was prepared to give them a name. I didn't understand why I should be giving my name, even though I was interested in going out with this girl. So, now, very interestingly, I want to jump forward to my diagnosis. So, 2 years before my diagnosis, there was this documentary about a new condition called Asperger syndrome. And my wife suddenly said to me, Laurence, what we see here is very much like some of the things you've got up to. And I said, don't be ridiculous, there's no way I've got Asperger syndrome. And she said, no way. She said, will you tell me about a father who decides to take his 2 young boys, who must have been about sort of 5 and 8 at the time, for a walk in the forest, and decides to play hide and seek, except he doesn't tell them. Suddenly they find themselves walking alone, and what do? You've run away a couple of 100 feet up and you suddenly jump out from a bush and say, boo? That was me. There was another time that I'd taken my boys to McDonald's and we had found a new game. It's called a thrown chip game. I think basically what happened, my youngest boy didn't like what he was eating, he threw it on the floor. So what did I do? I picked the chip up and threw it back at him, and of course suddenly the chips were flying everywhere. So of course my boys told their mother about the new game that they had found, they thought was hilarious. Daddy is in trouble. Daddy is in big trouble. In fact, it was from instances like this that my wife decided that we were not going to be going away on a family holiday because she didn't know when I was going to embarrass her next. Now, there was one other great story which a friend of mine reminded me recently, about there being something different about me. It happened on a holiday in America, where whenever I used to go on holiday with my wife, nothing was plainly holiday, it was also business as well. And so we'd flown to Miami, and I'd gone down with them, made sure they were settled down on the beach, and suddenly a waiter comes up and says, "Mr. Mitchell, there is we've got a phone message for you. You need to go back to the reception." Well, I can tell you, 12 hours later, I had not just gone back to the reception, I'd got on a plane to New York. The thing I hadn't done was actually tell my wife about it. So here's my wife, my mother-in-law, and 2 of my 3 children enjoying themselves, unaware that I had actually taken a taxi to the airport, got on a flight, and I actually turned up 36 hours later to say what a fantastic business trip I'd been in. I was about to make £20,000, and I couldn't understand why my wife and my mother-in-law were so angry with me. So that's just a sample of the sort of things I used to get up to. But I also had other problems as well. I didn't realise I was married to a manic depressive, and that was one of probably the biggest burden in my entire relationship of being a marriage, of raising children. There were so many different communication barriers, clashes of communications. What saved my life was meeting a communications coach who sometimes I find very, very assertive. He can be very bullying. He's still very much part of my life, and he can be a very, very big bully because he won't put up nonsense from me. But what he did, he introduced me to a life coach. And this life coach had a very, very soft approach, and he wanted to show me how to imagine that my mind was like the sky, and my thoughts were like the clouds. So on a very good day when I was feeling very, very good about myself, when my mind was flown with thought, it was called the clouds would just be going from one side of the horizon to the other. What he was actually teaching me to do was to not get drawn in to my thoughts. He was getting me to become the observer. What I found from his methodology was that some of my most difficult thoughts, my most invasive thoughts, suddenly disappeared as though they weren't there in the first place. You would have seen just before my website called lifebeyondlabels.com, and I got him to help me build it, and the whole idea of it was just trying to find it. Bernard, can you just help me for a second? I've got 2 minutes left of this talk. Shows another website. This is my website, Life Beyond Labels, but I did actually have another website which I would like to show you very, very quickly, which is very, very relevant, because it's what this let's see if it gets me there. No, right, then we're going to go to case studies. So here we're actually going to be looking at the sky. This is what's called peaceful mind sky, and it's when the mind is very, very much at peace with itself. A flow mind sky is a sky where we all want to be, where we're very happy, we're happy in our jobs, we're happy in our relationships, we're sort of general happiness. It's where the sky is full of flow. As you can see, it highlights most private all secrets, confident, aware, and the importance of awareness gives rise to possibilities. Now, so I actually divided 4 different states of mind. Another one is called troubled mind. Troubled mind, where a lot of us are today. We're very, very concerned about what's going on. There's not much we can do about it. The government has got its own ideas. Right, research autism is not getting enough funding, etc. So nothing you can do about it. But so from the point of view of the mind, there's a lot more going on in this sky. There's a lot more clouds and less blue sky. If we go on to the fourth scenario, this is the sort of sky you wouldn't want to be in. It's very much where the mind is its worst day. It's very, very invasive thoughts. Now you will learn from my from an article in The Independent that my wife committed suicide, and she probably spent a lot of her time alternating between what was called dangerous mind and troubled mind, but she was in denial throughout our entire life. So what this person, his name is Rashid, was able to allow me to do is to move away from all the difficult thoughts, all the troubled thoughts. So when troubled thoughts came along, yes, they would be there, but they wouldn't be so prevalent in my face. And suddenly I found myself becoming a lot more relaxed. And this Life Without Labels preceded my present website, Life Beyond Labels. And the whole idea about Life Beyond Labels is about building a life through a label. Anyone who comes along to be a member of my website can build their own wall. You can move the labels around. The labels can be either as complicated as you want them to be or as simple as you want them to be. So anyway, I think I should really conclude my speech. I hope you've got a little bit of information from me.